All right. In 3, 2, 1. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the Agents of Recovery podcast. Hope you all are doing well. Thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. We greatly appreciate all of your reviews, giving us those stars. It helps get this podcast further into the ears of those who truly need it. As always, it's so great to be here. Blue Robinson, head coach of Team Addict to Athlete, with our co-host, Brock Bevel, Chase the Vase. Brock, how you doing, my brother?
Phenomenal, man. Phenomenal. I'm excited. I love podcasting with you guys, man.
It makes a Tuesday morning go by a little bit better, doesn't it?
It does. I look forward to it.
Brilliant. And as always, Coach Max Hall down there in beautiful Arizona. Max, how are you doing today, my man?
Man, I'm great now that I've seen you two. Now that I've seen these two faces on the screen, man, I'm doing good. But I agree with Brock, man. I love getting on, and I've talked about this in the past. Is sometimes I almost feel like this is my own personal therapy session with you two. You know what I mean? I got these two therapist counselors right here, and we get on here and talk. And it's, as we talk about things we do in sobriety to stay sober, I think a big one for me is talking about it and having an opportunity. So whether you choose to go to an AA group, whether you choose to go to a non-12-step group, you have a counselor. We're on a podcast. I think it's important that you always keep it on the forefront of your mind. You're talking about it. I think that's a big deal in sobriety. So I look forward to it because it's like, it's one of my things I do on a weekly basis that I think helps me. So I appreciate you guys.
I dig it, man.
For the help. I just get on here and get exposed, and then you guys, then the troops
and
come
then we leave, it's like, what the heck?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. No, we appreciate that, Max. And listeners, that's the genuine aspect of what we want to do here, to help you overcome addictions, mental health, whatever you're facing. When Brock had this idea to put this team together, we didn't realize the magnitude by which maybe some of this help would be able to be rendered. So thank you all so much. Today, we're going to dive into some principle, listeners. We're going to dive into some concepts that we felt need to be addressed. These are some things that I truly believe can make or break your recovery process. Some of these things will revolve around these funny little emotional kind of mindsets that we get stuck into, and these are called triggers, right? Triggers to kind of compel yourself to step out of that recovery spot and start doing things that would look like or actually become addictive behaviors. And triggers can be people, places, sounds, substances, anything that can cause emotional distress. These are reminders, little hints, and they can come at you at a moment's notice. And in fact, as we get into this, guys, I want to talk a little bit about post-acute withdrawal symptom, otherwise known as PAWS. This is a situation that happens later on in your recovery. You could be having success in your sobriety, and then 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, all of a sudden start feeling like you're withdrawing again. So there's a lot of components to this recovery process that a lot of times we kind of skip over, but we're going to jump down into some basic principle and teach you guys some of these aspects of what triggers are, the warning signs that are kind of displayed before we slip into these kind of issues, and really talk about the principle behind understanding that when you're having these, it doesn't mean that your recovery's on the rocks. It means it's time to slow down a little bit. Brock, let's jump in with you first, brother. Let's explain to some of these listeners, maybe even some examples of some triggers that you've had, maybe even you continue to have, because there's still situations and things that I find myself in, certain songs on the radio that take me back to a spot where I'm like, oh man, you got to talk about the Super Bowl halftime show, right? Like,
Dude, my shirt
that was kind of an interesting thing. It was brilliant. I'm curious, brother, how do you navigate through the brick wall that sometimes feels like a trigger?
Well, it comes down to understanding your triggers. We talk about at Chase the Vase, we talk a lot about triggers and cravings, and we talk about addiction cycle, and knowledge is power, right? We use these three letters, AKC, and acknowledge, awareness, knowledge, and choice, right? In anything that we do, we have to be knowledgeable. Most people don't even understand their triggers. For example, my triggers are way different than your guys' triggers, but the identification of what they are in my life is what's keeping me sober. So in my life, my biggest trigger are smells, which is crazy. Like, you rarely hear somebody say, hey, that's a trigger for you. But for
You know
me,
why I'm
it
glad you
was.
said that, Brock? That is the number one causality of a trigger, because your olfactory sensory factor is off the charts. It is the most crisp sense that we have. So that makes perfect sense. Continue.
Yeah, so to understand it, trigger is not a craving. Everybody says, "Oh, I got these triggers and cravings all the time." No, you don't. There's a distinction between the two. A trigger is 15 to 25 seconds. It is that thing when your alarm goes off in the morning, that is the kick in the butt that says, "Hey, you're going to do this," or "You want this," or "You need this." So a lot of us, if we can get through the trigger, it's over. And that's what we have to understand. A trigger doesn't last. What lasts is your craving. The difference is this. Check it out. Triggers are external and internal. So an external trigger would be something that you see, right? Something that you can touch, something that you can hear. Those are kind of external triggers. You see your ex-dope dealer. You see your ex-girlfriend. You see the text message come up. Internal are things that are we can smell or we can taste. Like heroin, people that use heroin they'll say, "Dude, I can actually taste the heroin even after years of sobriety." Max, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so that there's some
I can
validity
taste
to
it
it.
right now. Right now, as you're talking, you bring that up. I can taste it.
Right. And that's what I think people need to understand is if we can identify what's triggering us to use, then we can combat and beat this addiction. Now, what's scary is people think, hey, if I go through 30 to 60, 90 days of recovery, my sobriety's it's good. I've had guys in the gym 6 months after their last use, they're working out, they're fueling their body, like they're pumping, right? And all of a sudden they stop and said, "Whoa, I just felt like I got high." And that's what happens is you still have residual drugs, alcohol in your body. People think, "Oh, the drugs are out of my body in a week." No, they're not. They're still locked in there sometimes. And as you move and exercise, you're purging them out. And so they're dislodging from in the blood or wherever, and they kick out and they're like, "Whoa, I felt that." And so I just want to make sure that everybody understands a trigger is quick. A craving, what's the difference between a trigger and a craving? There's a physical change in the body. Okay,
Absolutely.
that's what we have to understand. A trigger does not give you an erection. A craving does. Okay? A trigger is just that quick 15-second, "Hey, I'm going to look at porn. My alarm went off. I've always looked at porn at this time. Boom, I'm into it." Now, when it starts becoming a craving, those cravings can last a long, long time. And that's why we can't get our addictions to a craving, because if we get them there, we're dead. Because a craving can last 6 months until we feel it and we taste it, we eat it, we use it or whatever, and then we go back to the cycle. And so that's a big difference. Think about it like this, Max, Blue, how many times have you thought about sex, okay, and then you got involved in sex, and now you're fully involved, your blood's flowing, you have an erection, you're like, "Wait, stop it, we're done. I've taken this as far as we can, we're turning back now." Like, there's none of us.
Slippery slope, Brock. Slippery slope.
We're
You're right.
None of us are.
No.
I mean, because now our body's in full craving mode. And so if we get that with the drugs or we get that with alcohol, we're dead.
Yeah.
So that's a really important distinction. I just want to make sure that we understand totally different, because I hear them all the time. "Oh man, I'm craving it." Well, how long have you been craving it? "Oh, I just started." Come on, man.
Yeah, come on. Yeah.
Like,
Break it down a
understand
bit.
your addiction.
I dig that. Thoughts, Max?
No, that's good stuff, and it makes sense, Brock. And I've never heard triggers and cravings clarified like that before, and it makes a lot of sense to me, because I remember when I was first in the facility that I was in, one of the counselors got up and he goes, "Okay, I'm going to say a word. I want you guys just the first thing that pops into your head," and he'd say spoon. And I'm like, "Oh." Then he'd say Q-tip. You know what I mean? And then you know what I mean? Then he'd say like bottle cap. And it's like everybody's like these little tiny things that were so significant to us in our addiction because we used them all the time, automatically I think of using or drugs. Or, you know, he brought up, hey, just a normal pen, but you take it apart, so it's just the tube. You know, I'm like, okay, we're either snorting something or smoking something. You know what I'm saying? Like, it goes right to it. But that's something, exactly what you said, Brock, goes away. But then I've had times where I've gotten a call or a text message, or I've seen something on social media, whatever, and my body, like, I can feel it in my body. For me, that craving, it's almost like a huge rush of anxiety. Like, I literally will start shaking. I'm breathing heavy. Like, I start thinking about it. The anxiety of getting the drugs and using starts coming back. All those emotions start coming back, because a lot of the high for us was the chase and like the win of getting the drugs and using. That was all part of it. So those feelings all come back. And if I can't acknowledge those feelings, acknowledge that I'm having a craving, and go through my protocol that I have to get rid of it, that will linger and linger and linger. And that's how a lot of us will relapse. You might have that craving, just like Brock said, 6 months ago, and it may not be on your mind all the time, but it keeps coming back up. It keeps coming back up. And if we don't expose that and talk about it, pretty soon it's going to be too much for us to handle, and boom, off we go, right? And that's something that can be hard to control. It's hard to tell somebody about, and identifying it, I think, is a big part of being able to get over it, being able to understand, just like what Brock said, be educated about it. So for me, it's like I've had to avoid things. Now, if you brought me a Q-tip right now, I wouldn't be triggered. You know, now my triggers are different. It's stress. It's maybe it's depression or something like that. Now I'm looking for something to make me feel better. So the little things don't trigger me anymore, but it changes over time. But I remember, that first 2 months or whatever out of rehab, everything triggered me. Everything I saw, a Circle K on the corner that I used to make deals at. You know what I'm saying? Like, everything hit me. So, Brock, thank you for clarifying that. A trigger will go away quick. That craving, if it's not addressed right away, can last a long time, which will then lead to an eventual relapse, right? So that's good stuff.
Sure.
Blue, I know you had some stuff on this too.
For sure, and Brock, I'm so glad that you broke that down. You know, triggers, listeners, they can be broken down into, like Brock said, those two categories: internal and external. And I think it's absolutely impossible to try and identify every single one, because you're going to get blindsided now and then by some of these. So I'm glad that Brock kind of differentiated, the trigger from the craving, because really things like shame, guilt, anger, regret, depression, anxiety, loss of control, maybe heartbreak, loss of job, loss of relationship, fear of stress in and of itself, these feelings of being unsafe or misunderstood, post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma. All of these things are potential risks for having a trigger. But I love what Brock's talking about, listeners, because I'm going to break it down a little bit further, and I want you listeners to see, okay, so where does this principle that Brock just mentioned between cravings and triggers, where do they begin to divide? Because there's a behavioral cycle that happens with this too, because typically what happens is the trigger itself. Brock said, it could be a smell. So you have the smell, that's a trigger, puts a thought in our heads. The chain always goes in this direction. First comes the trigger, then comes the thought. After the thought kind of induces a feeling. That's that craving Brock was talking about. That leads to a behavior. Like, okay, well, I'm going to start looking for this. I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start looking, I'm going to scroll on Facebook, see if I can see the old dealer on there, what have you. That turns into an action which results in a consequence. They call it the behavior chain. It goes trigger, thoughts, feelings, behavior, action, consequence. Where in your mind do you guys think that, listeners, if you're struggling with this, if you have a loved one, where do you think in that chain we can make an abrupt change? What point is the point of no return, and where can we make our first change so that we don't follow that process? We're not going to be able to avoid triggers. So where do you think we break the chain before we go down the line?
Blue, here's the problem. not the problem. I'm going to answer that question. It's at the thought.
There you go.
And that's
100%,
the only,
Brock.
People ask me every day, how do you break addiction? That's one big thing. Teach me how to do it. I want to overcome this. The problem is, like you said, triggers are always going to happen. I'm 12 years sober. I can still walk into a doctor's office. I can still go into my pantry. And if there's a pill bottle, just because of who I am, there's going to be a trigger. Right?
Yep.
The problem is where you go from there. Do you kill it? Are you done with the addiction? Right? Or do you play with those thoughts? And let me give you a prime example. I'm actually right now, I'm working with a client. Love her. I just told her I'm going to talk about her because she just says, oh, I love your podcast. I love what you guys are doing. I said, well, tune in because I'm about to talk to you. Yesterday, she texted me. Okay. And she says, hey, Brock, you're not going to believe what I'm doing right now. I am on my hands and knees searching around my house on my cracks, around my house, in my house for pills that I possibly have dropped and that have landed in the cracks. And I'm like, for what? She's like, because, and this was her rationalization, and I love her, I'm telling her, but her rationalization was, I want to prove to my husband that I can be in proximity with these pills, give it to him and not use. And I'm like, damn, girl, you are already into craving mode because your trigger's gone. It's gone the 15 seconds because now you're thinking about it. Not only are you thinking about it, but you are dwelling on it. And you're on your hands and knees in action about it, searching the cracks. And I even said, come on, girl, you know what I mean? This reminds us of someone. I said, that's an addict behavior. And she's in that craving mode. And when you're in that craving mode, if she finds, and I even asked her, what are you going to do if you find it? Oh, I'm going to give it to my husband. I said, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
Because you're already there. So, and that's where it's hard because your thoughts, they take over. Yeah. And so if we want to kill addiction, you can't play with the thought. Pornography is the best way to explain it. We see pornography all the time. We see we see beautiful women and we can undress them with their eyes. We see magazines. You watch a TV and it's great, right? You can see all these pictures, but we see it. It flashes on our phones, but what do we do with that? Oh, that's just a picture. Do we scroll by or do we start fantasizing? Do we start thinking about it until we're like, now you start getting, I need to be solo. I need to get away. I need to go into my room. I need to have personal space. I need to have dude, that is 100% where we're in a shit show and we're in trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
So to answer your question, kill the thought.
Yes. You're 100% right. And Max, question for you, brother, how important this principle is in all that we do, because as a therapist, I say this all the time to my clients. I don't really care how you feel. Sounds kind of funny. I care about how you think, because your thoughts are what creates the feelings that creates this need or desire to want to use. And people don't realize that, because we live in a world now where I can say to someone, I think that the president of the United States, is doing a horrible job. And if someone else thinks he's doing a great job, we get to have a debate. And I might lose that debate, right? But if I say, I feel he's the worst president that we've ever had, that's my feeling. That's my truth. You cannot debate my feelings. So we've turned into a generation of people who feel instead of think, and it's caught us in some hot water. Do you see that kind of stuff where people put these feelings before their thoughts and they make that their truth? I mean, that's cancel culture in and of itself right there. But what do you think, Max?
No, I think it's a great point. First of all, Brock, to make your client feel better, we've all been there. Okay.
Yes, we have.
And I kind of told the story of one time I thought I dropped a pill in my car and I basically ripped my car apart trying to find it. So, I mean, we've all been there, and it's okay. It's okay. And as an addict, I totally get her thought process, because she's sitting there saying, oh, I'm going to find this pill and then I'm going to give it to my husband to show him. Reality of it is, as soon as she found it, all those lights start going off in her head, then she'll justify it as, well, I'll save it for a rainy day. And you know what I mean? Then it goes from there. But I love, you guys are spot on the thought thing. I'm going to tell you an experience that I had actually just recently. And even after years of sobriety, it came up. So you guys remember my bike wreck, right? So I go down and I got a really bad gash on my shin. I'm talking like a 2.5, 3-inch gash that I need to get sewed up. I walk into the urgent care and waited for like an hour. There's nobody in there. Finally, the nurse comes in. She's like, "Hey, I don't do sutures." I'm like, "What is that supposed to mean, you don't do sutures?" She's like, "I don't stitch people up." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "I've never done it before." And I go, "Well, can you do it?" She's like, she's like, "I've done it on like a dummy, like a rubber dummy person before." I said, "Good enough. Sew me up, lady. Like, let's go."
Rubber dummy.
Go, right? I don't care. She's like, "Well, don't blame me if there's a scar." I'm like, "I don't care if there's a scar. Stitch me up. I got a basketball game to get to." So after I get stitched up, she comes in there and we're doing it. And guess what she says? She goes, "Okay, I'm going to write you a prescription for some stuff." Boom. Like my everything just lit up inside of me. I'm like, I didn't even ask her. And she's going to write me Percocet right now. And like, I'm like, no, how do I explain it? I froze. That's the best way to explain it. I froze. I was triggered. Now I'm in the thought process. I'm like, I can get away with this. You know what I mean? Like, this is easy, right? And I can even sell that. Oh, man, yeah, and this hurts and that hurts. And I need, can you give me a 2-week supply instead of all those thoughts start going through my head. And I sat there frozen. She goes out of the room, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, and then the physical craving starts to happen. And I'm sitting there just like, I'm in pain, and I got an easy way right here to score some drugs that no one will know about. I've been sober
and it's
for a
legal.
while.
They're giving it to you. It's legal.
Mm-hmm.
Totally legal. They'd give it to anybody who went in there. I mean, I had a concussion. I was all banged up. My shin split open. You know what I mean?
Now he's got a broken back, his femur.
Yeah. Now everything's broken. Everything's hurting, right? I'm going to sell the crap out of this thing to see what I can get at. You know, I've been sober for a while. No one would really suspect. I'm not being drug tested. I could get away with this. It was one of the hardest. Oh, man, it was one of the hardest triggers I had. And I finally sat there, and she came back in, and I go, "You know what? I can you write me something else? Like, do you got some ibuprofen, some naproxen, something like that?" I just said, "I'd rather not go that route." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Let me get you this." And then I'm like, "Oh, crap, what did I just do?" Like, I just had it, right? All those emotions start going through. But I was able to, and I was lucky, I think, but I was able to identify the thought process I was having. Okay. But I was so close to making a mistake. So close. And that's how fast it can come up on you. When I went into that urgent care, I didn't even think about getting Percocet or drugs or anything like that. But then the doctor's like, "Hey, I'll write you a script for some oxycodone and you'll be good to go." And I just lit up. And that's how fast it can happen. So listeners, are you prepared for that? I don't care how long you've been sober. I don't care if it's 20 years, 10 years, 2 years, whatever. Things are going to come up. Things are going to happen. So what we're talking about right here is you're going to be triggered. It's the thought. When that thought comes up, you have to be able to handle that thought and recognize it for what it is. And then take a step back, take a deep breath, and then make an educated decision on what you're about to do, right? Don't rush into it. So kind of a crazy experience that I had, but I mean, I was right there, guys. I was close. So,
Max, you bring up, that's so valid, man, because I look at this. Did you guys ever, when you were in the chase, because you brought up the chase for it, like, do you remember the resolve? Like that just effort we went through to get it. And then when you got it, it was almost like you got it and then used, and it was like, The chase of it, the feeling of it, the way our brains work, it was almost more exciting for the chase than the actual use.
Yeah. The pursuit,
the anxiety of it.
Yeah, you know what?
You're
right. God, you know what?
So I just real quick, Blue, like it's that anxiety that comes with it. The anxiety of crap. I'm about to go into withdrawal. The anxiety of the excitement of the high. You know, I remember sitting around mornings, like calling people, calling. No one's answering their phone, or they don't got it. And I'm just freaking out. Anxiety, my heart's beating fast. I'm calling more people. Finally, someone calls me back and says, hey, I got it. And dude, those just lights start going. Boom, 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 boom. I'm fired up. I am seeing red at this point. Nothing else in the world's matter. I'm in my truck. I'm going 110 down the freeway. You know what I mean? Like, and then you get it, and then the preparation to use it is part of it, and then the use, and then the deep breath. And that lasts a moment, and then it starts over again. That's the reality and the brutal cycle of a drug addict. Is it just
Max?
never
How long did that
stops.
last for you? How long did that that ease? That like, okay, I've got it, I'm good, before you started being like, okay, the chase is back on?
Well, when I got low, you know what I'm saying? Because here's the other thing.
From usage to like panic mode, where were you at? How long?
Well, again, Brock, it depends on how much I got. Because here was the thing for me. I couldn't go to my bank account and take out $5,000 and go buy a month supply of drugs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My wife's all over the bank account. Man, I take $20 out. I get a call within 20, an hour later. Why'd you take $20 out? So I had to be very creative with how I was going to do. So for me, I would always get enough to last me a couple days until it was back on. Right? And then, it's like you start trying to save them, like, okay, I got this many for today, this many for tomorrow, but then I end up using more today. I justify it. And then I got one left, but I want to do one more before I go to bed. So I use it thinking, I'll find it in the morning. I wake up in the morning, realize I don't have any, freaking out. Drug dealers don't answer their phone before 10 a.m. and it's 7:30 in the morning. I'm going into withdrawal. I'm literally have gone to dudes' houses and knocked on their doors at 8 in the morning, like freaking out. That's how bad it got for me, the freak out part of it. But even though I would try to plan it out, hey, this should last me 3 days, a day and a half later, I'm out. And I'm freaking out again. So it was like a 2 or 3 day cycle of getting it, taking a deep breath, and then freaking out again about how am I going to get money out? How am I going to hide this? And everybody's dry right now, so how am I going to find it? Man, it makes me sick thinking about the cycle I was in, but that's what it is, Brock. I mean, it's a shit way to live your daily life, but it's how it was for me.
Now, can you take that when we talk about a cycle? Can you take that and break it down? Because Blue did a great job. Our addiction cycle is the same. Now, from day one to day whatever we stopped at, the cycle, the only change it had was it sped up. Because the cycle doesn't change. So the cycle starts with a thought, or start with a trigger, thought, a craving, to a use, to remorse, guilt, shame, whatever, back to a trigger. So when you look at your cycle, can you identify all of that? Like, do you know your exact triggers? So today, because I don't think our triggers change. Like,
no,
they stay with us because they've worked for so damn long. So why change a good thing? You know what happened. So can you, Max and Blue, can you identify? Because this is what I would invite every single listener out there. Guys, if you want to overcome addiction, we just gave you the playbook. We showed you how to win. Write it down. Start with your triggers. List all your damn triggers. What are they? External, internal. What has been attacking you? Then even your thoughts are the same.
Yeah.
These thoughts haven't changed. They may have evolved from when you were 8 to today, but the evolution is in the same realm. So write down your thoughts. Write down what your cravings. What do you feel? Do you taste it in your throat? Do you get angry? What is your body change? Okay? And then your use. Then what are you remorseful about? Why are you guilty if you're doing this? And then can you write it down? So Max, when you look back at yours, can you identify your whole cycle?
From when I was in the middle of my use?
Yeah. So even now you can even take it out now and use what are your good What are your good cycles?
That's the thing. Brock's right. You can, and listeners, you can use the same theorem here for the positive too. Your trigger, okay? That's always going to have those. The thought. Now that's where Brock's talking. This is where you make the change right here. If you want to change your world, you must change your thinking, because your thinking, whatever comes next, is going to cause the feelings, which turns into the behavior of searching around the floor, trying to find that one little seed or that one little scrap that's going to turn into the action of doing so, the consequence of using. You can do the same thing for the positive, Brock. I'm so glad you brought this up. The thought could be, no, man, last time I was in this situation, it ended up no good for me. That feeling of remorse and guilt, and just like I tell my clients, look, get offended by the substance, get offended by the pornography, let it piss you off to the point where that behavior is disgust and frustration and anger, and turn that action into turning off the computer, into going over talking to your spouse. The consequence being open communication, better relationship, back to trigger. I'm so glad you said that, Barack. So Max, I think that's a valid question. Can you use the theorem now, and is it the same speed by which you're able to process this stuff?
I mean, yeah. I think it's different, but the same. You know what I mean? Like it's different now because I'm not in withdrawal, and so the craziness of it is not the same. Like it was crazy, batshit crazy, in the middle of it, because if something happened or a trigger happened or whatever. I knew finally somebody had something and I was going to score. Bro, get out of my way. Get out of my way, you know?
But Max,
go ahead.
You're batshit crazy right now about the gym.
Yeah.
So think about it. You're addicted to the gym.
Yeah.
And so if I said, okay, Max, I'm taking the gym away from you for 21 days, you can't have any physical exercise, what are you going to do? Someone's getting murdered.
Yeah, I wouldn't last very long because I'd feel
but think
crappy.
about it.
I feel crappy.
Because all you've done is, crappy. Yeah. You've changed your cycle. You've shifted it from a negative to a positive. Now, what's your trigger to go to the gym?
Mine?
What's your trigger?
So this might sound weird, but it's not only because it makes me feel better, but I care about how I look.
That's a trigger.
That might sound bad, but I like how it makes me feel. And I've told you guys this before, man. When I got arrested, I was 175 pounds, looking like a freaking sick druggie. And I told myself, I'm never looking like that again. That's why I'm so self-conscious when somebody's like, hey, have you lost weight? Or, hey, you slimming up? I'm like, I'm like, where's the gym? I tell people all the time, they're like, hey, man, you're looking small. And I'm like, what? I'm going to the gym right now. Because
Brock,
I don't want to. I want to be completely opposite of the guy that I was, and that gives me anxiety. But it's also and people have said that to me. Oh, well, you just traded one addiction for the other. You're gosh dang right I did.
Absolutely.
Because I'd much rather be addicted to going to the gym than freaking snorting lines of cocaine all day long. Like absolutely I did, but I turned it into a healthy environment for me, and also to a point where it's not necessarily like the gym is taking precedence over other things that are very important in my life, like my family or my job or whatever. So, yeah, I replaced it. And when I get triggered, I have to do that. I got to go on a mountain bike ride. I got to go to the gym because that's how I handle it. The other thing that I had to do to change my thought process is instead of when I get triggered or I think of drugs, instead of thinking about the high and the ease and and cruising and all that stuff, I think about the withdrawal. I think about my family. I think about losing my family. I think about the embarrassment. I have to go take a look at my mugshot or something, I had to change that. I have to associate that with the negative part of it and not the positive. So even though the positive will come up, I got to go, hold on. Remember what this shit did to me in my life? Remember when I got arrested? Remember when I was in withdrawal and how bad I felt? Remember when I almost lost my family? Remember when everybody was making fun of me, calling me a druggie? How about that? You want to go back to that? No. Call up my buddy. Let's go. It's chest day. Come on, man. We got to go pump this out.
So before we move on, Blue and Max, I just want to challenge the listeners. Put down your cycle. Understand your cycle. Because if you really want to break it, we're giving you it. We're teaching you how to do it. Write it down. And then, what good cycles do you have? What is our trigger? What's our craving? Why are we getting to the gym? Why are we changing? Why are we having a relationship with God? All of these things are fueling us for improvement because we're not going back to the guy we were.
No.
Because, Max, had you used in that hospital when they were sewing your leg up? Think of where you'd be. Because one pill, dude, we're dead. We're dead.
Yeah. We just don't know.
And they're going to give you 21 pills. They're going to give you 21 days supply. I'm out. I am moved to Africa living in some dude's tent naked. That's it. Like, I don't even know how this shit happens to me. Like, honestly, I say that all the time, but it's like one pill, I know where I'm ending up.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love it. You're spot on.
And you know,
here's the thing.
One last thing, but before, as I was thinking here about triggers, something that could technically trigger me may not trigger me today, but it could trigger me tomorrow based on what's going on in my life, right? If I'm stressed out about something, if, you know, something crazy happened in my life, whatever, all of a sudden that thing that maybe didn't trigger me before is going to trigger me today. And so when you write these things down and you think about them, understand that I can look at a Q-tip right now and not be triggered. I'm fine, right? But let's say I'm having a bad day. Let's say it's just like I feel like the world's caving in on me and I get the case of the F-its, right? I'm like, man, F all this stuff. That's when I could get triggered. Absolutely, because now I'm in that state of mind to be triggered, okay? And so I think it's important to realize that you never know when it's going to come up based on your mood and what's going on, right? Like, I truly think that relapse will start 4 to 6 months before you actually relapse, in my opinion.
For sure.
Right? I think
say
it
again.
What was that?
Say again. Say that again.
I said I think relapse starts 4 to 6 months before you actually relapse. Absolutely. It does. Because take this for, I mean, people think about this. How many people relapsed during COVID? Think about that.
Oh, yeah.
I know, like, okay, you're stuck at home. You're out of your routine. The gyms are shut down. You're working from home. Your kids are on laptops at home. You're trying to help them out, right? The world's like, feels like it's crumbling around you. How easy would that be, right? Based on your circumstances to where, man, that starts wearing on you. Now you're kind of in a funk. Boom. There you go, man. Like, it's so circumstantial in what's going on in your life, but it's important that if you've at least written down those triggers, written down those stresses that you know come up in your life that affect you, if you understand them, it's going to be easier for you to react in the positive way that you need to when those thoughts arise. And so
because you see them, you've identified them as a trigger, and then when they hit you, you're like, that's just a trigger.
Right.
No big, let's move past it. But if we don't, that's what you're talking about. They just beat you down.
Yep.
Max, you bring up a great point. I love it. So I watched this documentary last night. It is a gut check, and I'm not going to recommend you guys watch this because it is full of triggers. I mean, I celebrated 26 years of sobriety last Tuesday, and I was still like, holy piss, you guys. This documentary, it's called A Life of Crime. This guy started filming these 3 people in addiction in 1984 and followed them till 2020. It is mind blowing. You see these guys as their kids running and gunning in the streets of New Jersey, drug use, theft, all this stuff. They go to prison, they get out, they have families, they go back to prison. They're using, you guys, this one, and I'll let the cat on the back because I don't recommend watching this unless you have a very tough stomach because it was all I could do to, on Valentine's Day, we're watching this horrible documentary.
What's the name of it, Blue? Sorry.
It's called Life of Crime. It's on HBO Max. You could probably Google it, but I'm telling you guys, I'm going to let the cat on the back because I was shocked by this. Everyone dies. The one lady in there, her name was Delirious. Go figure. I thought for sure she'd be the first one that died. From 1984 all the way to 2020. Do you know what killed her, you guys? What killed her is she went through this life of in and out of jails, in and out of rehabs, in and out of drug use, had these beautiful 3 little kids, and it shows them like little kids, and you watch them grow up. What killed her, Max, was after 13 years of sobriety, COVID, and not COVID the virus, the separation of. She didn't get to go to these meetings for 6 months. Everything was locked down, and that lack of connection, that lack of being able to follow her pattern through, that's what took her.
Yeah.
You guys, it was a gut check. But Max, I think I figured out your your number one trigger, and I want you to tell me if I'm spot on or not. But your biggest trigger is anxiety. It's the worry, concern, overthinking about the future. And the thing is, you've mentioned this a few times in here, that same anxiety that you said that you got when you're racing down the freeway at 100 miles an hour to go get that next fix. And then once you got it, right, that feeling of like, okay, you know, you're like, at any means necessary, I'm hitting the goal. That anxiety also throttled you on the football field, man. It was that same concept. So how do you differentiate that negative sense of anxiety to the positive sense of anxiety? Because both of those principles are exactly the same for you. Does that make sense? That anxiety you had before you ran out of the tunnel, onto the field, whatever, we're getting this done at all means necessary, is the same anxiety that drove you 100 miles an hour down the freeway. Does that sound like I'm in the ballpark?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And I like how you say there's good and bad anxiety, because I flourished off that anxiety in football. Absolutely, I did. Like, I loved it.
And you flourished as an addict with it too, didn't you?
Yeah, if you want to call that flourish, absolutely.
See? Absolutely.
You know? But I think you're right in the sense of when you have anxiety about the future, I'm worried about if I'm going to be okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, am I going to be all right? Can I handle this? And I've developed a habit of being able to handle things based on substance, because I knew with this substance I could handle it. So the anxiety of, I can't handle this without my buddy, you know, that's big when you take that away. And so you have to fill that with other things that we're talking about. But I never had like anxiety like that we think of today, like panic attacks and all that, till after I got sober. I never had it before. I could get up and speak in front of thousands of people and do an interview or whatever, or play in front of thousands of people and be fine. In sobriety, you asked me to give the closing prayer, and I'm like freaking out, like I can't breathe. And now I'm like, I can't handle this. What's wrong with me? Like, all that goes through it. And that was weird for me. And that was something that I had to overcome. And I realized, man, this stuff is real. And I had to figure out why. And this is what I figured out. For so long, I was this person, this football player, this quarterback of BYU, the Cardinals. Everybody wanted to be around, talk about everything I said. Everybody wanted to listen to. I was the dude, right? Now that I'm not anymore, no one I had this thought that I had lost all credibility. So for me to speak or to say anything or whatever, I had anxiety about it because of a little bit out of fear, judgment, and lack of self-worth. And I had to work through that, because I'm not the same dude. I got to come up with a different plan. I'm a different person. So that anxiety really hurt me for a while. Never drove me to the point to where I was using again, but man, I was struggling with it big time. And so yes, Blue, anxiety definitely is one of those triggers that I've had to deal with. And I like how you say it's good and bad, because I had used it for good, and then when I used it for the wrong purpose, man, it took me to a dark place, man.
And how do you differentiate it? With the thoughts that come after the trigger.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
The trigger in the tunnel when you're going to go out there and crush whatever team you're facing, versus that trigger of like, I need to get this pill now. It's the thought, man. What do you think, Brock?
Dude, I'm kind of giggling because I'm the opposite of what you're saying. I believe Max. I don't know why we're self-diagnosing Max right now. So Max, I guess you're on the hot seat.
That's cool.
But
everyone gets a chance in the hot seat, right?
Yeah, Max, you need to be there. I believe yours was any means necessary was driven by your ego, and a lot. I mean, mine too, to be 100%. Because anything we do it 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what every single one of your teachers growing up, your parents will always, when you die at your funeral, that's what they're going to say about you. Max did everything 100%. He was a go-getter. And when you think about that, that's how we live. That's our ego. That's our emotional intelligence of who we are. And some people have that and other people, I mean, we're all built different. But that can go to be a benefit in our lives, or that could be a detriment. And in addiction, we took it to the extreme. But it's the same way we're living now in our sobriety. We're living it as wide open and ego run as we can be. We want people to know, listen, we found sobriety and you can too.
Yeah.
And I like that when we start thinking about these triggers and cravings, people really complicate addiction. They complicate recovery because of the pain that is associated with long-term recovery. And if we can just slow it down and help people understand that it is a cycle that needs to be broken. Some are further and deeper in the cycle than others, but it's no different. If the cycle is started and it always comes back to remorse and shame and guilt, and then you're triggered again, your cycle's not broken. So that's why we're different today, is because we found that key that unlocked our cycle, and we were able to stop it. And so there's a lot of pride and ego wrapped up into that, saying, listen, it took a lot to get here, and slow yourself down and try to figure out what it looks like in your life. Does that make sense? And for people, they totally can just take this and hear this podcast and really, I'm afraid that people just hear this podcast and move on. But of all the podcasts we've done, I think this one, for an opportunity to learn about addiction, to change their addiction, this is it. This is what people need to implement in their lives. Find out what's fueling your addiction and break the cycle.
Mm-hmm. You know what the number one ability to do that too is, Brock? The number one thing you can do to change to curb a craving or trigger, do you know what that is? Exercise, movement. Movement dumps the dopamine. It brings on the serotonin when you're done. Exercise is the number one thing. I tell my athletes all the time, if you want to go drink, relapse, go ahead. You have my blessing. But go put in your 5K first. Go hit that 3.1 miles. And when you get back, if you've done it, I will give you my blessing to go drink. Not one time have they ever done it. They get back and they're like, I feel good. I don't need it right now. Exercising, resting, counseling, therapy, spending time with positive people, drinking and eating well, joining support groups, eating, all these things are ways to curb some of these triggers and things. And I love the fact that when listeners, if you have the trigger and you get to the thought and you start having feelings, the last exit strategy is changing behaviors. If you've missed the warning signs of changing your thoughts and having feelings, by the time you hit behavior, you're on autopilot. Your action and consequences are going to follow. It's a heavy theorem here, but Brock's right, you guys. It is so damn simple. Some people say just don't use. Yeah, just don't use. But this is even simpler than that, right? I mean, look, create a different channel to channel your thoughts. I think you're spot on, Brock.
There's something that I learned. And this goes along with the cycle, and this is how I broke my cycle, okay? The cycle is your thoughts eventually will become your actions, okay? And then your actions will become your habits, okay? And then your habits are what develop your character, okay? And as we're drug addicts, we don't necessarily have the best character. You know what I mean? Because of our thoughts and our actions and our habits, okay? So in order to change my character, to change my habits, it all goes back to changing your thought process. That's why I'm so big, and I tell people all the time, you got to have a mind shift. Like there has to be a click in your mind to shift, to change how you perceive yourself, others, the world, what you're thinking about, what you're concentrating on. For 5 years, I concentrated on scoring drugs, right? That was number one. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that necessarily I was a bad father or I wasn't functional. I was able to do all those other things, but that was number one. Every day, my thought was doing that. So I needed to change that into something positive, something good. I needed to change it into the new Max Hall. And what are my new values and morals? Yeah. Who do I want to be now? I want to be a good dad. I want to find a good job. I want to stay close to football. Okay, I want to coach. Like I found that. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, every day, I'm not thinking about it. I'm thinking about other things. I'm thinking about service. I'm thinking about coaching, whatever. My thoughts change. So my actions change. I'm not out driving around all over the place trying to do that. I'm focused on the right things. Then I start developing habits. Hey, I got a habit. I'm getting up. I'm going to the gym every day. I got a new routine. Guess what? My character started to change. I started to become a different person. Started to be more understanding, more all the things that go with it. And that changed who I was. I'm a different person than what I was before addiction, during addiction, and now here I am now. There's always where you're at, what happened to you, And now what are you going to be? Okay? That's the addiction cycle to get sober, but thoughts, actions, habits, character. That's how it's going to work. And you got to start back at the mind shift with the thoughts. So kind of an ending point there for me would be that. Think about that cycle. What are you going to do on a daily basis to change what you're thinking about? Are you reading a book? Are you listening to a podcast? What are you doing to get your mind started right in the morning, working out, to set yourself up for the rest of the day on what you're going to do and how you're going to act? So that was once I learned that, it was key for me moving forward.
Spot on. Spot on. Listeners, you have been absolutely well fed today. I want to thank Max for bringing up this topic today. This was his idea. Thank you so much. It was one of those podcasts that I think you're going to be able to keep on repeat and send this to anyone who may be struggling. It could be a life or death situation. Follow the process, triggers, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, actions, and consequence on both the positive and negative side. And do it with those around you so that they also know the potential triggers that you face. And please get active in your recovery. Take it from us, the agents of recovery.
Boom.
Okay.